Um, so today we have a pretty packed schedule. With the help of these organizations and these redistricting reform advocates, we have 6 here partnered today. We're going to hear brief remarks from each of them, and then we're going to be opening up to questions immediately following. But first, I'd like to say, introducing a person who is covered this topic nationally and with great detail, and he has his 2 books, Rat F and Unrigged. Author David Daly. David, thanks for being here with us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with so many democracy heroes from across the country, and I include in that all of you members of the media. We appreciate your coverage of voting rights. We appreciate your being here today. We know there's a lot of other news going on. There is an awful lot at stake in this year's election. It's much more than the White House. It's much more than the Senate. This is a redistricting year. The state legislatures and the folks who are elected in this year will have the power to draw state legislative and congressional districts in much of the nation. It will determine what much of the next decade of our politics looks like. Right now, there are 59 million Americans who live under minority rule in a state where the party that won fewer votes in the 2018 election still holds one or both chambers of the legislature. That's bad for democracy. It insulates politicians from voters. It entrenches a party in power. It pushes politicians to the extreme. It leads to policies that citizens disagree with but can be powerless to change. All Americans, regardless of party, ought to be outraged at the way that it debases free and fair elections. And indeed, they are. What we saw in 2018 was that voters in 5 states, in red states, in blue states, in purple states, Utah, Missouri, Colorado, Michigan, Ohio, made important statewide changes that take the power to redistrict in important ways away from politicians or rein those politicians in important ways. People get this. This won big in 2018. It won everywhere with 60, 70% of the vote in really unusual states where you might not imagine that these issues would have the kind of resonance that they do. The fight is on for 2020. There are more states on board for fair maps. Before politicians get hold of the next decade of maps, we're going to hear from them today, and we're going to hear from them about the challenges that they are facing in this difficult election year. It's a really important year. All of this builds on a legacy that began really in the 2000s in California. So I want to introduce another hero of democracy here. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger is really one of the original founders of this movement for fair maps, as the 38th governor of California. He really fought and won an important and defining battle. I think it's one of the most important pieces of his legacy is this determined and victorious fight for fair maps, the winning 2008 and 2010 statewide initiatives that took map making out of the back rooms of Sacramento, took it away from the political elite who thought these districts were theirs to divide amongst themselves and return them to the people. The Citizens Redistricting Commission in California is one of the most successful electoral reforms in modern American politics, and has really done so much to give people control of their government back, to put citizens in a room transparently with the job of solving a difficult problem and having to work together to get this done. Imagine if our politics worked like that. It's the result of his vision, his political will, his electoral muscle, and the governor is such a champion of fair maps, such a friend to this movement, and it is an honor and thrill to introduce Governor Schwarzenegger. Thank you for having me, everybody.
Well, thank you very much, David, for the nice introduction. It's exactly the way I wrote it. But anyway, David, I just want to let everyone know that I think the world of you. just simply because you could be writing about anything else. You're a brilliant writer, you're very talented, you're very smart, you're very good with details and all that. So you could be writing about so many different subjects, but you've picked, redistricting reform as your passion. And we really appreciate that, because it was, I remember when I started out here in California and we tried to do the reforms here, how difficult it was to articulate what it was about and how it works. It was just so complicated to explain and to convince the mass to go and start putting, kind of focus on this and put the spotlight on this, and to convince the press to do it was almost impossible. And so because of that, of course, we lost many times when we put it on a ballot. And then eventually, after 10 years of struggling and fighting, we won. And we won with open primaries and also with redistricting reform, so that we could have a totally independent commission away from the politicians. So there was a huge victory for the people, but it was not easy to do. And I think that when I've met you and I've started reading your stuff about redistricting reform and about the evil that has been going on here in America for the last 200 years, I said to myself, wow, this guy really knows how to write that and how to express himself and how to, convince people and how to articulate it and all that stuff. So you've done a really great job, and I just want you to know that we want to thank you for your effort, and without you, we couldn't have done or come that far as we have. So thank you very much for that. I also want to say thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So I also want to say thank you to Katie Fahey, because Katie, 3 years ago, no one knew, who she was. And then all of a sudden, she was sick and tired after the 2016 elections. And she was one of those people that did not just sit there on the couch and complain, but she got up and she just started communicating and put on Facebook, a message about how she was upset about what's going on and how she wants to do something about it. When she realized she wasn't the only one that felt that way, there were thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people out there in Michigan and also felt the same way. And so there she created a movement. And now everyone knows who she is, because she just simply refused to just take things the way they are and to keep the status quo. She wanted to fight. And I always said that, I came to America because it was the land of opportunity. But it is not just the opportunity that we have here to become rich and famous and to go and to follow your dreams and to become the greatest in whatever you want to do, if it's athletics or if it's education or if it is in law or in politics or whatever. That's one way of looking at opportunities that are here, and there's plenty of them here in America. But it's the opportunity that we actually can change things in America. Is another one of those opportunities that we have that America offers, that we have the power to actually create change, that we can go up and say, I'm not going to take it any longer. I'm going to do something about that. And I think that Katie took that, and that opportunity and just, walked into the door of opportunities and did such a fantastic job in Michigan. And now, of course, she's rallying all over the country to do the same thing all over the country. So Katie, my hat is off to you. I have the utmost respect for you, for your talent, for your passion and everything like this. And I always love working with you and doing things together with you. So thank you very much for all the great work that you have done. So now let me just say, because of our the way the district lines are drawn, we've seen tremendous changes now over the years in places where we have the district lines redrawn and where we have reform, like in California, where we have had now, legislators that are liked by the people. Imagine that when I was governor, they had an approval rating of 14 to 18%. Now they have approval rating between the 40s and 50s. Then they could never pass or do anything that was not exactly up their alley or what kind of the district represented. You know, if it was a liberal idea, someone would just say, you know, well, I'm coming from a conservative district and therefore I can never vote for that. Otherwise I lose my job. And then when it was a conservative idea, liberals would say, well, I could never go back to my district after I vote for this. I would lose my job. So I said to myself, well, what kind of districts do we have that when you vote for something that's good for people, that you're being voted out of office? And then I realized that the way the system was fixed, that the districts were drawn in such a way that there's very heavily Democratic districts and very heavily Republican districts. Now, some of them are natural like that. You know, San Francisco will always be, and Los Angeles will always be kind of a liberal kind of a city. You can't change that, but there's so many other districts that were changed and altered, so they become ultra liberal or conservative. And so therefore not much was getting done. I was trying to get as much done as possible, but I realized that the real action is by creating an independent redistricting commission. And so we have then seen now in other states that it works really well. And we have seen now in California that now conservatives are voting for environmental laws, and they're voting for healthcare issues, and they're voting for immigration reforms. And I just want to just say that it will be great if we can also see how the liberals are working now. You know, that they're working 90% now with the Chamber of Commerce, for instance. They're voting for the Chamber of Commerce endorses 90%, the liberals are now with them. So they can see that they have moved much more to the center. And that's what we need nationwide, because it is inexcusable that we have this unbelievable income inequality or racial inequality or opportunity inequality and educational inequality, or that we have, you know, no energy policy in America, that we have no environmental policy, that for 30 years we talk about rebuilding our infrastructure or doing immigration reform, healthcare reform, and all of those kind of things, and it doesn't get done. Nothing is getting done. None of the important things are getting done. Now, don't misunderstand me. We are still the greatest country by far, the greatest country in the world. And there's people desiring from all over the world that want to come to America. There is no two ways about that. But we need to get those things done. I mean, in a sense, we have seen recently the riots and all this stuff. Imagine that after all of these years, with Democrats in charge and with Republicans in charge, we still have no anti-lynching law that was passed. I mean, it's inexcusable. With Democrats that have had the White House, that had the House, that had the Senate, and had total monopoly, and they couldn't get it passed, and they didn't do it, and Republicans didn't do it. So, I mean, to me, this is embarrassing. So we have to do better than that. You know, as great as the country is, but I think one of the things that when you love your flag and when you love your country is that you want to improve it and you always want to make it better. There's no two ways about it. It's in our DNA. And so I think it is so great when we have so many warriors now, so many crusaders that are now marching in the same direction and trying to go and create the reforms in these various different states. And so I think that the way it's getting done is through people power. I think it is a direct confrontation with the status quo. We want change, we want improvement, and the politicians would do everything they can, Democrats and Republicans, may I remind you, would do anything they can to derail you, to derail us, because they don't want those changes. And this is why we have to keep going and communicating. This is why we have to go and explain this to people. I mean, it's like unbelievable if you think about that 92% of Americans for universal background checks before you get a gun. So I think there's a lot of things that we got to go and change, and we got to improve. And the only way we can do it is through redistricting reform. So I have to continue on with my meeting that I just interrupted to make this call and to be on the Zoom meeting here. But I wish all of you good luck, and you all know that I'm in your corner, and that anytime you need me, I'm there for you to fight all the way in order to really create a fair system in America. So thank you very much, all of you, and I'll be back.
And good luck with your meeting. Our focus here today is for our states. There are 6 states on the ballot. In 2018, when we passed our initiative in Michigan, there were 5 states that also helped pass this. I think this speaks to the fact that this is a true movement, that Americans, regardless of living in a blue, a red, or a purple state, all want fair maps. They want accountability from their politicians, and we are tired of waiting for it. 2020 has been a very interesting year, and with that, lines are about to be drawn which will impact the next 10 years worth of elections. So without further ado, I wanted to make sure that we actually got to why we're here. There are 6 states, several of which have very pressing deadlines for the ballot, where people are trying to still qualify to make it so that redistricting can happen in their state in a fair and impartial way. They have thousands of volunteers who've been working very hard, and we want to make sure that we can raise awareness and help understand who's still making a race towards the ballot. So I'd like to pass it over to Kate Titus in Oregon, who can tell us about their efforts.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Titus. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause in Oregon, and on the Executive Committee for the People Not Politicians campaign, which is a fair redistricting campaign here in Oregon. So we're just 9 days out from the signature deadline to get on the November 2020 ballot. This is really a make or break moment for Oregonians to enact a fair and transparent process in time for the 2021 redistricting. We all know that the COVID pandemic threw a wrench in our lives, in our democracy, and that was true for this campaign as many others. The stay-at-home orders came into place, so we had to rethink signature gathering for this campaign. We revamped the signature gathering, couldn't use the regular person-to-person methods out on the streets, door-to-door with clipboards. Instead, we mailed to 500,000 households, each of which had 2 or more registered voters, so mailed essentially to over 1 million voters in Oregon, getting the petition to them. Started a massive online effort, emailing folks that are related to the groups that are backing the campaign. Started a remote volunteer operation with volunteers meeting regularly on Zoom, and then doing the hard work of outreach by phone, by email, their own networks, one by one, to reach people about this. It's been really exciting to see this unique signature gathering program work. Despite the pandemic, we had tens of thousands of people responding to the mail immediately after, and we're getting thousands of signatures in daily. So it is really pretty exciting. It's an unprecedented effort. The support is there. We're seeing Oregonians are stepping up. Now it's just a battle against time. And I'll pass it on to the next person.
Hi, Katie. I couldn't hear you, but I'm assuming the next person is me. I'm Bonnie Miller, and I am with the League of Women Voters of Arkansas, and I also serve as chairperson of Arkansas Voters First. And we are working on a ballot initiative campaign to establish an independent redistricting commission here in the state of Arkansas. And according to the Schwarzenegger Institute, a study out of there, Arkansas is the 8th most gerrymandered state in the country when it comes to our state legislative districts. And so this has really been a grassroots campaign led by the League of Women Voters. In other states, this is our second ever national campaign in terms of the National League of Women Voters. And we have been working in March. We filed paperwork as our ballot question committee and we were able to start circulating petitions mid-March, which, as everyone knows, was sort of in the midst of COVID, really increasing and ramping up. And so I think we were out in the field collecting signatures for a couple of days before effectively being shut down. Our governor issued a state of emergency, and in-person collection really flew in the face of CDC guidelines and who and directives from who. And so there was just no way to safely collect signatures in person. And so we filed a lawsuit in federal court, and we just had one of the most onerous ballot initiative processes out of the 15 states that have this process in place. And so we have to have a signature witnessed, and then we have to have the canvasser have it notarized that they witnessed all of these individuals signing. So really not workable in this current environment. And so a federal judge did agree and sided with us. We worked with Campaign Legal Center with this lawsuit, and the witnessing requirement and notary requirement was waived. And so we were able to get a petition uploaded online. We had a pledge to sign campaign first as we were getting the digital petition ready. And so we had a lot of individuals go to our website and do this pledge to sign. And meanwhile, we've been putting out weekly newsletters and had a really big social media presence. And then once that petition was available online, individuals could download it and mail it, or they could request us to send one to their home with a pre-addressed and stamped envelope and send it back to our campaign. And that was up and running for a couple of weeks, but recently the Attorney General filed an appeal. And so we are now at the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. They granted an administrative stay. And so we are back to collecting signatures in person. Unfortunately, we're still fighting. We filed briefs late last night in the case, but we are back to collecting signatures in person, which, as all of the states here present know, is a struggle. I talked to Sandra Cosgrove, who's on this call in Nevada, while we were trying to re-strategize and figure out how to get all of this done for best, and figure out what they were doing for best practices. So having this network has been really important, and as we have had to pivot rather quickly. So what we're doing now is we have paid canvassers. We're using a mix of paid canvassers as well as volunteers. And this weekend, we're actually going to be hosting some drive-up signing events throughout the state so that people can drive up with their masks and as safely as possible sign our petition. And we have until July 6th to turn in our signatures. The state of Arkansas requires 89,151 signatures to get a ballot initiative passed and onto the ballot for November. So that is where our campaign is at. We are hard at work, and unfortunately back to signature collection, traditional signature collection process prior to our lawsuit. So I believe the next person up is North Dakota. Pass it over to them.
That's correct. This is Carol Sawicki. I'm the president of North Dakota Voters First, which is the organization spearheading our initiated measure to get redistricting reform on the ballot, along with several other proposals to increase the voter participation in the process in North Dakota. Our deadline is also July 6th to collect 26,904 signatures. And we also, our North Dakota Voters First, went to court to try to change or have a temporary change in the regulations of how we had to collect signatures, but unfortunately that was rejected. So we are back to in-person signature gathering. We would have loved to have it that we didn't have to do in person and also have the signature gatherers pages notarized, but that didn't happen, and we would have loved to have electronic signature gatherers. But we did set up a very strict social distancing and COVID-19 protection program for our signature gatherers, and we are doing quite well. I believe we are going to be all right in getting this 26,000 or so, and many more signatures by our deadline. We are asking all our signature gatherers have to wear the fancy N95 masks. The petition clipboards are covered so that they're not exposed to the air too much. Everybody gets their own pen, and a whole bunch of other rules and regulations would make it, I think, make the people who are signing feel that we are very serious about COVID-19 and about keeping everybody as safe as we can. We don't have that, we're sort of a small organization. We're doing very good work, but I don't know that I have that much more to say about the whole process. I think, we're sort of running low on time, and I'm a short and fast speaker, so I think I'm going to turn it right over to Nevada.
Okay, thank you. This is Sandra Cosgrove. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Nevada, and I'm also with Fair Maps Nevada. We filed to do a constitutional amendment to give Nevada an independent redistricting commission back on November 4th, and have pretty much been tied up in court with Democratic leadership suing us to stop us. So I think we're to the point now where we finally finished up and wrapped up all of our litigation right into the middle of the pandemic. And so we are asking, we did also go to federal court to ask for an extension of our deadline, which we received. So now we're at August 3rd for our deadline. But the judge said that she could not order herself that we could have electronic signature, but that our governor could use the same authority that he's using to issue other executive orders. He could also help us with electronic signature. So what we're asking right now is for anybody that supports us to either like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And on our social media accounts, we give detailed instructions on how to reach out to the governor to explain which parts of Nevada revised statutes he could make an executive order under, and some examples of executive orders that he just released, which would be the same as what we're asking him for. And so what we're asking is that he allow us to gather petition signatures through our online voter registration system, because it's already safe and secure. We already recognize it as a way to allow someone to sign so that they're not having to be face-to-face with somebody else and put themselves at risk. So if you're interested in helping us, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram at Fair Maps Nevada. And thank you for having me. And I think we're going to Oklahoma now.
Andy?
Should be unmuted, Andy.
Oh, maybe we got re-muted. There you go.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, good to go.
Okay, super. Thanks for the patience there. So my name is Andy Moore, and I'm with People Not Politicians, Oklahoma. And we, like many other states, we're having conversations about the issue of gerrymandering back 2018, 2019. And once the Supreme Court ruled that they were not going to rule on the issue, those conversations got a lot more serious. And last fall, in October of 2019, we formed People Not Politicians. It's kind of a conglomeration of a few other groups, the League of Women Voters of Oklahoma, another organization I run called Let's Fix This, and a bunch of other just supporters and people who care about this had come together. And we filed our ballot petition back then. We were swiftly met with some legal challenges. As we expected, what we didn't expect was that the politicians would come out so hard to try to cling to their power to gerrymander, even just one last time. And so we got hung up in the courts through January. So what we thought would take a few weeks took a few months. And when we came out of that, they had basically required us to go back and rewrite a summary paragraph, the gist that goes on the petition form. Essentially, the challenger said that our summary was too summarized, or it wasn't summarized enough in the way that they wanted. So we rewrote it, we resubmitted everything, and just a few weeks ago, the state Supreme Court gave us the go-ahead, so everything's good to go, and we could proceed to the next step. Normally, the next step in Oklahoma would be signature collection. However, the Secretary of State in our state, who's a former legislator and has certainly, worked closely with them, has put a stay on all signature collection in our state until the end of the governor's declaration of a state of emergency. And we don't know when that's going to be. Our deadline is to get on the ballot is 2 months from today, August 24th, is when we'd have to have all the signatures collected, validated, and any additional legal challenges resolved by then, which is a tall order. If he magically came out today and said, all right, you guys are good to go, I think we'd have a real tough discussion about, can we get this done in the amount of time? Now, I think it's important to say that even if we don't make it on the November 2020 ballot, which we really wish we could, it's ridiculous, it's taken more than a year, even aside from COVID, we are all committed to this. And so even if we can't get it done this year, we're committed to getting it done as soon as we can. It's in our state, Democrats gerrymandered for 100 years. Republicans have had control of the legislature for the last 20 years, and they've gerrymandered just the same, often a lot of the same districts. And we think it's time to end that. And so moving forward, we're looking forward to having an independent commission in Oklahoma, whenever that might be. With that, I'll turn it over to, I think Virginia's the last state.
Brian?
There we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks to the people and everybody for kind of pulling us together. I really love being together with other reformers like this. I'm Brian Cannon. I'm the executive director of One Virginia 2021. We're pushing the redistricting reform initiative in Virginia. We do not have a signature gathering petition, so my thoughts are with all of you all for the next couple of weeks and months on getting yours done. Our big ask is a vote yes on November 3rd, because that's when the redistricting reform amendment is on the ballot in Virginia. Our current situation in Virginia is similar as it is across the country. Politicians get together in a smoky back room and draw these districts to benefit themselves. These maps reflect someone's reelection strategy instead of our communities. We've had two successful racial gerrymandering lawsuits in Virginia this decade, and there's really just no check on politicians. So we have to do something better. To amend our state constitution, we had to get it through the legislature twice. The control of the legislature flipped control in between those two passages, but on March 6th, it passed the General Assembly, and in a bipartisan fashion, which is really important to how we do everything, as I know it is for everybody else on this call. What we have on the ballot this November is a citizen-led commission. It's half citizens, half legislators. There's sunlight, so there's no more smoky back room, and there's important civil rights protections in this. Effectively, this will end partisan gerrymandering, it will end prison gerrymandering, it will end mid-decade gerrymandering, and it's going to make racial gerrymandering illegal under Virginia law for the first time in our 400-year history. So we've got a lot on stake on the ballot this November. It was a hell of a fight to get it here, and I know a lot of folks are in that kind of fight now in their own way with signature gathering. I'll end by this and saying, where we are now, more than ever, it's important to build and reform institutions that are actually worthy of our community's trust. And I think redistricting reform is at the heart of that. So thanks to Katie and everybody for putting this on, and glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, Brian. Just so everybody knows, we will be doing an edited version of the video that we can make available afterwards. So the recording won't be instant like we were hoping, but we will be able to do that. And we did remove the previous Facebook Live. This one's been up with all of the states, which is great. And we'll be able to upload that video there once it's edited. So thank you again all for your patience. I'd love us to be able to do questions now. I'm not sure if everybody knows how to use the raise hand function, but if you go over participants at the bottom of your screen, you should have a little raise hand. Otherwise, I'll first see if anybody knows how to do that with a question. You'll get to be first. And then if not, we'll just go to unmuting. Sarah has closed the meeting, so we shouldn't be getting any other unexpected gifts. All right, seeing no raised hands, we'll go with the unmute option. And then I'll call, if you can just unmute on your computer, then I can recognize that you have a question and I'll be happy to call on you just so we don't have a lot of people speaking.
Katie, it looks like April has her hand raised.
Perfect, thanks, Ben. So April from the Nevada Current, you can go first. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, I figured out the hand raising. I know the man from Oklahoma, sounded like they may not be able to get it on the ballot, but I wanted to hear from the other states as to what do you think the likelihood of making those various deadlines are. Obviously, this COVID has changed a lot, so I'm wondering how confident are you that you will be able to gather the signatures given the restraints that you individually have as states?
So seeing April's from Nevada, do you want me to go first?
Sure, Sandra, thanks.
Okay. If we can get the governor to allow us to use electronic signature through our online voter registration system, it shouldn't take us very long at all, because the only people who can get into that system to use that type of signature are people who would be eligible to sign our petition. And so it's just a matter of getting people into the system and signed. We don't have to wait on the other side for our clerks and our registrars to validate the signatures. Only people who can sign would be allowed to get into that system to sign, and it would just be a matter of putting them on a spreadsheet, saying they had signed, and moving to the next person. So we're very confident. If we can get that, we can make it.
I can say for Oregon that at this point, it's really too hard to tell, but we're doing everything we can to meet that deadline in 9 days.
I will say that for Arkansas, we still have a lot of work to do, but we are very confident that we will get the requisite number of signatures needed to get on the ballot.
North Dakota, did you want to? I think you're muted, Carol.
I'm pretty sure we are going to be able to get on the ballot. I mean, it sounds like a really tiny number of signatures we need compared to the big states, but we're a tiny state. But we have over 18,000 signatures already of the 26 plus that we need. And I think we will be able to get on. I can't, I wish I had a crystal ball. But I think we'll be able to do it.
Great. I think that was all of the states that have open signatures. Walt Sword from Michigan Polycast. If you'd like to unmute, see your hand raised.
Hi there, I was just curious to find out if any of the states are being sued to keep them off the ballot, such as we experienced in Michigan.
I think we all are.
I think in North Dakota we aren't yet. It might very well happen, but I don't know.
Yeah, we were in Oregon. We had to jump through that hoop before we could actually start gathering signatures.
We've had 3 separate lawsuits.
Actually, in Oregon, we're still have another outstanding lawsuit challenging that we have 1 or 2 subjects in the initiative, but that we can't wait for that to be resolved. We're going ahead.
Yeah, that's right.
In Arkansas, we have not faced any lawsuits at this point, so we're fortunate there. But like I said earlier, we are still continuing to fight our own lawsuit that we filed originally to make collecting signatures safe during a global pandemic.
Thank you.
There are no lawsuits in Virginia right now, thinking that we don't expect any for the ballot measure part.
Great. I see, Jason, did you want to ask a question from the Redistricting Network?
Oh, sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'm wondering if Brian could speak to the pushback from Democrats in Virginia and what the community can do to support One Virginia and their initiative.
Thanks, Jason. So we have gotten pushback from Democratic kind of party establishment folks, or about some small faction of them. I anticipate it will be more. The Democrats are in charge in Virginia now, and they're using the same arguments that the Republicans were using when they were in charge about it's really our time to gerrymander kind of thing. We're hearing that kind of behind closed doors. But we'll get that. The good news is that the polling suggests that the average Democratic voter, just like the average Republican voter and the average independent voter, overwhelmingly support this redistricting reform. So we just got to capitalize on getting the message out to people and telling folks of really what this amendment does, which is a big step forward. So we'll be launching the official kind of vote yes sometime in July, and that'll be the kind of big push to educate folks on the amendment.
Thanks, Brian. I have Norman Torrell. Unmute.
Turrell. Yeah, I'm Norman Turrell. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Oregon. I'm also the chief petitioner in Oregon, or one of two, and chair of the campaign committee for People Not Politicians. I wanted to make sure everybody is pushing on the same issue. In Oregon, we're getting a lot of pushback that this is somehow a partisan issue between Democrats and Republicans, and my answer to that is that it's not. It's really about a process issue that affects all parties equally. And another argument that's related is that why should we be working on this in a Democratic state when there's so many other states and Republicans that are not pushing on this? And my answer to that is that, in fact, there's a lot of Republican states that are, in fact, pushing on this, and you represent those. And so I want you all to push back on this idea that it's a partisan issue, that instead it's a process issue that affects voters versus the powers that be and the safe districts that are formed that disenfranchise voters, and hopefully we can get through this together. Thank you.
Great. I know we did get an online question kind of related. Well, we have two that were submitted beforehand for a reporter who couldn't make it. One was, and I think we covered this a little bit, but if there's any other states who want to talk a little further about any precautions that you've been taking while still trying to gather signatures, or while having to work within the COVID constraints, any strategies that you've been using. We're just wondering what some of those might be.
So I'm with Arkansas, and I will say that our canvassers are using PPE. All of our volunteers have to use PPE. We're being as safe as possible in this environment. And with our events coming up this weekend, doing a drive up, that is really for people who really don't feel safe, right? And getting out, and increases the distance and just makes it even easier to sign. So we're trying to do as much of that as we can before July 6th. But, I think it's just sort of standard PPE, and then just trying to be creative with the events that we're hosting, and build in as much physical distance as possible.
Thanks, Bonnie. Any other states? Be creative.
Well, in Oregon, our whole program is geared toward overcoming the barriers of COVID. We're not doing the regular signature gathering for the most part. There might be some small volunteer efforts that are happening out on the streets, but really it's mostly trying to do this remotely. So we've been having volunteers meet by Zoom, like they would check in other facets, and use phone and electronic forms of communication to still do that outreach one by one. We've been using tools like email and mass peer-to-peer texting as ways to reach out to people. We are fortunate that in Oregon, we do have an option that you can electronically download a petition from the web, sign it, and mail it in. So that's one of our big tools that we're using. We can email folks the link and get them to do it. It's a big ask. It's more than just click and add your name to a petition. You've really got to do the work to read it, print it out, find an envelope, a stamp, and get it back. But that's one of the tools. And then mailing the petitions directly to households has been quite effective.
So in Nevada,
I know, Kate. Oh yeah, please go ahead, Sandra.
So in Nevada, we just did our primary, and our Secretary of State, with the blessing of the governor, moved us to an all mail-in voting. And they had just adopted a brand new electronic signature program that we've never used before. And the governor said it was worth it to do that to make sure that people stayed safe. So if he thinks that it's important for people to stay safe when they're voting, we think it's important for people to stay safe when they're signing a petition.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know, Kate, that your social media has some great pictures of your volunteers, too, as they're sorting through those mailed-in petitions, also being safe, wearing gloves, masks, all of that. So it was great to see, and people can check it out there. I wanted to see if there was any other questions. Otherwise, I have one last one from one that was submitted beforehand. If anybody wants to unmute with a question. That can take a second. Okay. So the last question was related to the partisanship, I think, too. Just response from voters, if you guys are seeing support regardless of political affiliation in your state for your initiative.
I have kind of a funny anecdote about that from Oklahoma. As we started the campaign, we talked to a lot of voters, including a lot of lawmakers and state officials, both current and past. And almost everybody, regardless of party affiliation, said, you're on the right side of history and I'm for your deal. But if they'd been in office, or if they were lobbyists now, that revolving door that we have between legislators and lobbyists, they were very hesitant to come out publicly. And so we know that when we get on the ballot, there's going to be a lot more support than even there is kind of on the streets, because a lot of those heavy hitters that are politicians really do support it. They just are nervous. And I think that shows like the power, the stranglehold that politicians have on the system right now, that kind of trickles out. And so it still makes my heart feel good to know that we're doing the right thing.
Any other? Yep, go ahead, Sandra.
So in Nevada, the Democrats think we're working for the Republicans, and the Republicans think we're working for the Democrats. So we figure we must be doing something right.
Sounds familiar. Bonnie, did I see that you wanted to chime in?
So in Arkansas, we've seen support from both sides of the aisle. We've seen a lot of bipartisan support. We've had legislators from both parties publicly support our effort, and Arkansans really want this. We see gerrymandering as the biggest threat to democracy that we face today, and redistricting is the new frontier in the fight for civil rights, and Arkansans get that, and we want that in our state. And so for many reasons, we feel confident that this will get to the ballot and that we will get the signatures needed, and we're grateful that we've had so much support in this state, and which has been frustrating with this pandemic because we had so much momentum getting started, and then we just sort of, we were halted. So very grateful to be working with a really dynamic and creative team, and pivot and to networks like this that can connect us and share best practices. So thank you all for having us.
Of course. All right. I don't see anybody else unmuting. Well, thank you guys so much. I know we've ran over, but I want to say a special thanks to everybody. I know just from Michigan's perspective, I know we got lawsuits immediately following passing this, and most recently, though, the court has said that that the cases being brought against us were without merit, and there's been no pickup from the most recent repeal, which is really exciting. The other thing too is we with having an independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, the Secretary of State's office yesterday released the final applicants that made it through. You know, for us, it was a notary that you needed, which during COVID, they had to shift to doing online ability for people to set up meetings with the Secretary of State's office to get notarized. They couldn't find one in person. And it was the first time ever doing this, and we had just under 10,000 official applications. I'm sure much more than that actually applied, which is super exciting. And tomorrow, the Secretary of State will be doing the first draw, random draw, to whittle that number down to 200, and then we have a process after that. But it's really exciting to see, even amongst all the craziness going on in our world, that people were still so excited to be able to participate in this process that has been done for decades behind closed doors without the people of our states being at the center of it. So I'm so excited to see what continues to happen in all of your states. As I mentioned, we'll be doing an edited version of the video that we can send out to everybody, as well as all the information for where to find websites and all of that. If you know any folks in your networks, for all the volunteers on, who are in Oregon, Arkansas, North Dakota, Virginia, Oklahoma, Nevada, I don't think I missed anybody, please let them know that these petitions have a deadline, or that voting has a deadline too for Brian in Virginia, and that the only way that this happens is if the people demand it. So even though there's so many things vying for our attention, that is how these things will pass. I also want to do a quick shout out to my team to say thank you to Ben, great introing, and Sarah, great kicking people out and all that. I know this is a feat to pull off. So thank you so much, everybody. And we look forward to seeing more fair maps for this next round. It'll be an exciting country to live in 2021. Thank you.